Have you ever loved someone so deeply that walking away felt like the end of everything? Yet somehow, it was the beginning of your peace? Welcome to Stillness Unfolded, where we explore the wisdom of Zen, the silence beneath suffering, and the truth that lives within the heart of letting go. In today's video, we'll journey into one of the hardest, most transformative acts in love, walking away from someone you still care about, not out of resentment, but out of awakening. We'll explore how that moment of goodbye, when done with clarity and compassion, becomes a powerful path towards self-realization. You'll discover why real love sometimes asks us to release, not hold on, how silence becomes a sacred teacher, and how your energy shift can change not just your life, but theirs too. Sparkles. This video is filled with rare insights, Buddhist wisdom, and emotional clarity. So I invite you, watch until the end to truly absorb its full depth. If you find value in this message, please give this video a like, subscribe to Stillness Unfolded, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us grow and create more mindful content just like this. Now, let us begin this journey of remembrance and return. Part 1. The wisdom in the goodbye. A lotus never rises from marble floors. It breaks through mud, and in that struggle, it blooms. Much like the human spirit, which finds its truest shape not in comfort, but in letting go. You don't walk away because you're weak. You walk because you've realized that staying is what's breaking you. There comes a moment in life, not always loud or dramatic, when you sit in silence with a person you love and feel something missing. The laughter sounds the same. Their presence is familiar. But the space between your hearts, it's no longer alive. It's echoing. No betrayal. No explosive fights. Just a subtle unraveling of energy. That's when you know you're no longer met. You're maintained. And yet, the idea of leaving feels unbearable. Because the heart is still full. Still hoping. Still attached. But Buddhism teaches us something radical. True love is not about possession. It's about liberation. Letting go of someone you love is not an act of desertion. It's an act of courage, of clarity, of compassion for them, yes, but mostly for yourself. Because staying, when the soul is begging to grow, is a kind of spiritual self-harm. We've been taught to fight for love, to hold on, to prove our loyalty through endurance. But what if real loyalty begins with honesty? What if walking away doesn't mean the end of love, but the transformation of it? It is not the love that fades. It is the illusion surrounding it. The illusion that proximity equals connection, that effort equals meaning, that to be worthy, we must be wanted. When we hold on too tightly to something already slipping through our fingers, we suffer. Not because the love wasn't real, but because we were afraid to face its changing form. Zen reminds us that everything is impermanent, and that includes feelings, desires, even attachments that once seemed eternal. So you wake up one day, and the decision is not born from anger, but from inner stillness. A knowing, a quiet strength. You pack the bag not with resentment, but with reverence. You close the door not to escape, but to return to yourself. You realize, walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you remembered who you are beneath the longing. It's not forgetting. It's not erasing. It's releasing with love. Because love is not just about presence. It is also about presence of mind. When the heart is clouded by fear, we mistake attachment for affection. But when we see clearly, we understand. Love that demands your self-abandonment is not love. It's fear wearing a mask. This first act of stepping away is the beginning of a different kind of love story, the one between you and yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's the love that was missing all along. Part 2. The space between hearts. There is a silence that speaks louder than any goodbye. You notice it first in the little things. The way their eyes linger somewhere else when you speak, the way their laughter sounds just a bit more distant, the way their touch feels like habit instead of hunger. They're still there, and yet, not really, not fully, not in the way they used to be. And so you wait. You wait for their presence to return, like waiting for spring in the depth of winter. You check your phone more often than you'd like to admit. You replay memories, looking for warmth. You begin to ration your vulnerability, hoping your caution might draw them closer. But love is not a negotiation. It's not something you barter for through silence, self-sacrifice, or overcompensation. In Buddhism, the concept of anatta, no self, teaches us that our identities are fluid, impermanent, interdependent. But when we become too entangled in someone else's presence, we begin to lose sight of our own essence. We start living not as ourselves, but as the reflection we hope they still want to see. You become a version of yourself that exists only in relation to them. And when that mirror begins to crack, you panic, not just for the relationship, but for the loss of self it represents. We try to mend what's breaking. We give more. We shrink. We explain. We hold on harder. But holding on tighter to someone drifting away only amplifies the pain. Trying to revive a love that no longer has roots is like watering a plant already uprooted. You're not helping it grow. You're only delaying its decay. There's a quiet suffering in being emotionally alone beside someone physically present. You begin to feel like a ghost in your own life, visible but unseen. And yet, the world tells us that letting go is quitting, that leaving is weakness, that enduring is noble. But is it noble to abandon your own truth? Is it weakness to choose peace over pain? Zen teaches us to observe without judgment. So you begin to watch your habits, your thoughts, your longings. And you start to see the pattern. Your energy is wrapped in waiting. Waiting for them to notice. Waiting for them to care. Waiting for them to return. But what if the real return you need is not theirs, but yours? What if you are the one who's been missing from your own life? In that realization, something shifts. A new kind of silence enters. Not hollow, but holy. Not lonely, but liberating. It's not the absence of their voice, but the presence of your own. It's not their withdrawal that hurts the most. It's how far you had wandered from your own center in trying to hold them close. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to sense that this space, this quiet chasm between hearts, is not your prison. It's your path. And on this path, you are not walking away from love. You are walking toward truth. Part 3. The Sacred Solitude. Solitude is often misunderstood. We mistake it for emptiness, for lack, for failure. But in the eyes of the awakened heart, solitude is sacred. It is the fertile silence from which clarity blooms. After the goodbye, whether spoken aloud or whispered in the soul, there is a pause, a stillness. The world doesn't notice. But inside you, a storm settles. And in its place, space. At first, it feels like absence, like something vital has been ripped away. Your routine is unanchored. Their voice, no longer expected, echoes in the chambers of your thoughts. You reach for your phone, forgetting there is no one to text. You pass familiar places, wondering if they remember them too. But slowly, something remarkable begins to happen. The space that once felt like loss becomes room to breathe, room to feel, room to return to yourself. You begin to reclaim the minutes of your day. You cook with attention. You walk with your eyes open, no longer searching for someone in every face you pass. You light a candle, not in memory of them, but in honor of yourself. This is where solitude transforms from loneliness to presence. Buddhist teachings speak of the middle way, a path not of extremes, but of balance. Solitude is the middle ground between dependence and avoidance. It is not retreating in fear, nor clinging in desperation. It is simply being with your breath, being with your thoughts, being with your wounds, and not rushing to heal them. You learn to sit with discomfort, not as an enemy to conquer, but as a teacher to listen to. It tells you things you once drowned out with noise. It reveals fears, longings, and truths that only silence dares to show. And perhaps for the first time in a long time, you ask yourself, not what they need, not how to win them back, but this: what do I want? Who am I now? You begin to rediscover parts of yourself that had grown dim. The way you laugh when no one's watching. The books you set aside to make time for them. The quiet joy of walking barefoot on morning grass. The simple ritual of tea without distraction. Solitude becomes your temple. And in that temple, you no longer pray for someone else's return. You pray for wholeness, for understanding, for alignment. This is not bitterness. This is not pride. This is restoration. Zen tells us that emptiness is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything before it takes form. In your emptiness, you are not broken. You are becoming. There is no timeline for this becoming. No need to rush toward a new connection, a new distraction, a new healing. You do not need to prove that you've moved on. You only need to notice that you are moving within. And the more you walk this path of sacred solitude, the more you realize you never truly lost them. You only lost the version of yourself that believed you were incomplete without them. That version is not your enemy. It was your bridge. But now, the bridge has done its job. You are here, whole, healing, and no longer waiting. Part 4. The energy shift they can feel. Energy never lies. Long before words are spoken, long after actions stop, the energy we carry speaks for us. And when yours shifts, from longing to stillness, from needing to knowing, it echoes far beyond your silence. You don't announce your growth. You don't perform your peace. But somehow they feel it. They may not understand it. They may not even admit it. But the absence of your emotional gravity unsettles them. Because once, they were the sun around which you orbited. Your thoughts revolved around their moods. Your energy molded itself to their needs. And without even realizing it, they came to expect that constant pull. But now, you are no longer circling. You've become your own center. And when you stop orbiting someone else's validation, it shifts the entire dynamic. The cushion of your devotion, the emotional safety net they never thanked but always relied on, is no longer there. At first, they may respond with confusion, then curiosity, then perhaps even regret. They might reach out. A message, a like, a memory sent at midnight. It's not always an apology. Often, it's subtler. An attempt to see if your energy is still accessible, if your heart still leans toward them. But something inside you has changed. Not in a hardened way, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You no longer feel compelled to answer immediately. You no longer rehearse responses in your head. You may even smile, not because they've returned, but because you did. This shift isn't about punishing them. It's not a strategy. It's not a game. It's presence. Zen teaches us, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Nothing external changes. But internally, everything has. You still move through life. You still feel, but you are no longer moved by the same need. The need to be chosen, to be seen, to be enough in their eyes. Because now, you see yourself. And in that seeing, you no longer grasp. You love without clinging. You remember without aching. You forgive without returning. Your detachment is not indifference, it's maturity. It is the realization that real love never demands self-abandonment. They feel this. They feel your silence not as distance, but as sovereignty. Your absence is no longer a wound. It is a mirror. And in that mirror, they see what they once overlooked. They see the presence they took for granted, the peace they disrupted, the love they were not yet ready to hold. It doesn't always bring them back, and it doesn't need to, because this story was never about changing them. It was always about changing your relationship with yourself. And now, for the first time, you are no longer waiting to be seen. You are choosing to witness yourself. With reverence, with patience, with all the love you once gave away so freely. And that, more than any message, any response, any reunion, is the true transformation. When your spirit no longer leans, but stands. When your love no longer pleads, but breathes. When your energy no longer seeks, but simply is. This is when everything begins to shift, not just within you, but around you. And that shift is undeniable. Part 5. Karma and the cost of staying too long. Karma is not always what we do to others. Sometimes, karma is what we allow to be done to us, what we tolerate in the silence of our suffering, what we accept in the name of love, even when that love begins to erode our spirit. In Buddhist teachings, karma is action, but it's also an action. It's the subtle choices that repeat, the cycles we stay inside, even after they've begun to harm us. And there is a quiet, heavy karma that forms when we stay too long in relationships that no longer honor our soul. Not because we're weak, but because we hope. We believe that if we give more, explain better, hold on tighter, they'll see us again. That the love will return to what it once was. That the pain is just a season to endure. But seasons are meant to pass, not trap us in eternal waiting. Every time you ignore your intuition, every time you silence your truth to keep the peace, every time you sacrifice your well-being for someone who has stopped seeing your worth, that karma builds, not as punishment, but as a quiet debt to yourself. And eventually, That debt shows up as emotional exhaustion, as resentment, as that aching feeling that you've become a stranger to your own reflection. Staying too long becomes a betrayal, not of them, but of you. You begin to lose the lightness in your spirit. Your laughter becomes less spontaneous. Your body feels heavier, not from effort, but from carrying what's no longer yours. Zen teaches us to be present with what is. And what is, sometimes, is this. You have outgrown the space you were trying to shrink yourself to fit inside. And that's not failure. That's growth. To walk away in such moments is not to quit. It is to cleanse. You release not just the person, but the karmic weight of self-abandonment. You say, no more. Not out of anger, but out of reverence for your own life. And when you leave in this way, something profound happens. The karmic loop begins to dissolve. You no longer attract the same patterns. You no longer fall into the same traps. You no longer rehearse the same wounds disguised as new connections. Because you've learned the lesson, love that demands you shrink is not love. It's ego. It's fear. It's attachment in disguise. Real love honors expansion. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for both people, is to walk away. Not to hurt them, but to stop hurting yourself. And in doing so, you give them the space to awaken too. Your absence becomes a teacher. Your silence becomes a mirror. And whether they grow or not is not your burden. What matters is that you no longer keep yourself small for someone who never learned how to hold your depth. This is how karma becomes dharma. Dharma is truth. It is the path. It is alignment with the soul's calling. When you choose yourself, not from pride, but from peace, you shift from karmic reaction to dharmic direction. You begin walking not away from someone, but toward your sacred purpose. And that walk, it purifies everything. Part 6. Returning to the true self. There is a version of you that existed before longing, before compromise, before you learned to mold yourself into the shape someone else needed. Zen calls it the original face, the essence of who you are beneath the stories, beneath the masks, beneath even your name. And after walking away, as the silence deepens, something ancient stirs. You meet yourself again, not the self who begged, not the one who waited, not the one who tried endlessly to be enough, but the one who simply is. This return is quiet. It doesn't come with fireworks or epiphanies. It unfolds slowly, like the morning sun warming the floorboards of your room. Subtle, but undeniable. You begin to notice things again. The texture of your breath, the curve of your thoughts, the stillness between heartbeats. You no longer look in the mirror searching for their approval in your reflection. You begin to see yourself through your eyes, not theirs. And you start to make choices not based on their preferences or their absence or your fear of being alone, but based on your inner alignment. What do you enjoy? What brings you peace? What makes you feel alive? These questions used to feel selfish. Now they feel sacred. You dress differently, not for attention, but because something in you has shifted. You eat differently, speak differently, breathe differently. You laugh, and this time, it doesn't carry the weight of performance. Because now, nothing is being performed. Everything is real. This is the beauty of returning to the true self. It's not about changing who you are. It's about uncovering what was always there, beneath the dust of expectation and emotional survival. In Buddhism, awakening is not the achievement of some perfect state. It is the moment you remember, I was never lost. You were simply layered beneath the longing. And now, without the pull of someone else's orbit, you move freely. Not out of rebellion, but out of remembrance. You remember your gentleness, your resilience, your power, and you begin to understand, walking away was not the end. It was the invitation. An invitation back to the self you abandoned in pursuit of someone who could never fully see you. That person you tried to convince. They were never the destination. They were the mirror, the catalyst, the lesson. And now, you no longer chase. You no longer explain. You no longer wait. Because you have arrived. And in this space, your soul exhales. The craving is gone. The ache has softened. The questions no longer keep you up at night. And if they reach out now, if their voice returns, if their apology comes, it no longer unsteadies you. Because you are no longer the person who needed it. You can love them, still, from a distance, from clarity, from peace. But you do not need to go back. Because the version of you that once waited there no longer exists. You've become someone new, not through force, but through release. You've remembered your original face. And in that remembering, the search ends. Because what you were looking for in them was always you. Part 7. Real love begins with liberation. Real love does not imprison, it frees. But to arrive at that truth, you often have to pass through fire. The fire of longing, the ache of loss, the surrender of what you thought love was supposed to be. And when you walk away, not in bitterness, not in haste, but in awakening, you begin to see what love actually is. It is not a contract sealed by proximity. It is not a ritual of constant reassurance. It is not the need to be needed. Real love breathes. It flows. It gives space. It says, I see you, and I also see myself. Buddhism teaches us that attachment is not love. It's fear disguised in longing. When we cling to someone, what we're often clinging to is not the person, but the feeling they gave us. The identity we built around them. The illusion that without them, we are incomplete. But liberation begins when we stop searching for wholeness in someone else's presence. When we stop chasing and start standing. When we stop proving and start accepting. When we stop fearing solitude and start honoring it. You may still love them. You may always love them. But now, that love doesn't burn, it warms. It doesn't demand, it respects. It doesn't grasp, it flows. If they return to someone transformed. Not someone waiting to be saved, but someone who already returned home. And if they don't, your peace is not shaken. Because you've discovered something deeper than connection. You've discovered sovereignty. This is the paradox of walking away. You leave not to lose love, but to purify it. You release the roles, the stories, the identities that once confined it. You make space for love to evolve, from attachment into awareness, from performance into presence, from illusion into truth. Zen says, let go or be dragged. You let go. And in doing so, you stop dragging your soul through endless negotiation. You stopped bending your spirit to fit into spaces it had already outgrown. You walked away. And that step was not a goodbye to love. It was a homecoming to it. A love that begins within. That doesn't need to chase. That doesn't crumble when left unreturned. That doesn't collapse in silence. Because now, silence is sacred. You no longer fear it. You live inside it. You let it guide you. And when the world is quiet, you can finally hear the sound of your own soul. It no longer cries. It no longer begs. It sings. Not for them. Not for anyone. For you. For the path that called you back. For the wisdom that rose from your breaking. For the strength it took to walk away from what you wanted in order to find what you truly needed. And now, the door behind you does not haunt you. It blesses you because it led you here, to this moment, to this freedom, to this truth. You do not have to stay to prove your love. You do not have to suffer to be worthy. You do not have to lose yourself to feel connected. When love is real, it liberates. It expands. It aligns. And if that love ever returns, it must arrive changed, awakened, respectful, and free. But if it does not, you've already found the love that will never leave. The one that lives within. The one that asked you to walk away, not to give up, but to rise. You didn't walk away because you stopped loving them. You walked away because you finally started loving yourself. And in that sacred act, you didn't lose love, you purified it. You returned to your center, to your stillness, to the truth that real love does not demand you to disappear in order to be worthy. So when you think of them now, if peace rises instead of pain, know this. You've already healed. And if they ever return, they'll be met by someone who no longer waits, but welcomes, without needing. Because love, in its highest form, doesn't cling. It liberates. Thank you so much for watching this reflection on love, detachment, and awakening. If this message spoke to your heart, please let us know in the comments. What was the moment you realized walking away was the most loving thing you could do? We read every message, and your story might help someone else find their clarity too. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Stillness Unfolded, and turn on the bell so you never miss our next meditative insight. Until next time, may your silence bring you strength. May your solitude guide you home. And may you always choose love, even when it means letting go.